They called her fat, a disgrace to the family. They said no one would ever want her. And that's why her own father handed her over as punishment to a slave. But what no one knew was that he would love her in a way no noble man ever could, and what she discovered in his little wooden cabin changed everything forever, a buried secret and a betrayal that tore two families apart. Welcome to Period Tales, where you dive into stories that burn like furious storms of the heart. And today, hold on tight, because this isn't just a saga of impossible love, it's a revolution of feelings that will explode your emotions. It's about a woman who was treated like punishment and discovered her true beauty was in the eyes of the last person she expected, a story that proves sometimes we suffer the worst humiliations not as a curse, but because our destiny waits on the other side of pain. Drop your names in the comments and tell us which corner of the United States you're watching from, because today we reveal how a cruel rejection turned into the most powerful love of colonial times. Get ready to meet Valentina Mendoza, the daughter given away as a prize, and who won a heart of gold. The hallways of the Mendoza Palace gleamed like molten gold under the glow of chandeliers. The mirrored walls reflected luxury with cruelty, as if wealth itself mocked anyone who didn't fit the mold of nobility. In the center of the grand ballroom, dresses twirled like colorful flowers in the breeze, accompanied by soft laughter and judgmental glances. The click of high-heeled shoes echoed over polished marble. It was a night of celebration, of false appearances, of gilded lies, and among all those faces painted with forced beauty, there she stood, Miss Valentina Mendoza, daughter of Count Richard, granddaughter of captains, heir to blue blood, and a body that did fit the era's standards. Valentina never went unnoticed, but never for the reasons a lady would wish. Her dresses were always custom-made, wide, decorated with simple embroidery, as if trying to hide rather than adorn. Her hair was thick and brown, always tied with plain ribbons, and her truly beautiful face was ignored because her figure took up more space than malicious eyes could accept. That night, Valentina walked through the ballroom with careful steps. She knew she was being watched, knew every muffled laugh might be about her, but she kept her posture straight. What she didn't expect was the cruelty about to come. A group of young gentlemen chatted near the white marble fountain. Among them was Mr. Francis, the man her father had quietly suggested as a possible husband. I hear your father plans to marry you to Miss Valentina, one friend teased, loud enough for everyone to hear. Francis flashed a cruel smile and replied, I'd only marry her to carry the family's luggage or shield me from cannon fire. With that size, I don't even need bodyguards. The laughter exploded like bombs in the air. The laughter hurt the most. Valentina was only a few yards away. She froze in place, pretended not to hear, but her eyes filled with hot tears. Her heart shrank like a wounded bird. The ballroom kept spinning, but inside her, time stopped, and in that inner silence she saw, at the far end of the room, her father, Count Richard, watching the whole scene. He did nothing. Didn't approach, didn't defend her, just turned his face as if nothing had happened. That night, Valentina didn't dance. She only waited for the moment to climb to her room, slip off the tight dress, let down her hair, and look at herself in the oval mirror that had followed her since childhood. She ran her fingers over her own face, studied what everyone seemed to reject, the sweetness in her eyes, the firmness of her chin, the delicate outline of her hands. She did hate herself, but the world seemed determined to teach her how. The next morning, she was summoned to the grand office of the house. Her father sat rigid in the high-backed chair, surrounded by advisors and the housekeeper. His expression was pure ice, no warmth, no regret. Valentina, he said in a dry voice, there are decisions that must be made coldly. You brought no honor to our name. But perhaps you can still be useful." She frowned. What did he mean by that? The crown needs to reward a man for services rendered. A slave. Yes, a slave. He saved a marquis's life in battle. The king wishes to reward him with a companion. Valentina's blood froze in her veins. "And what do I have to do with it?" she asked, voice trembling. Her father finally met her eyes. "You are that reward." The world crashed down on her. "This is punishment," Valentina whispered, trying to stay steady. "It's destiny," he replied with the coldness of a man who never acknowledged his own daughter. That afternoon, Valentina didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't beg. She simply went to her room, took the red ribbon her mother wore in her hair before she died, and tied it in her own. She knew her life was being sold like a bargaining chip, but she still chose to leave with her head high. The next day, at dusk, Valentina was taken to the edge of the royal lands. There a small wooden and stone house awaited, and in front of the house stood Thomas, tall, strong, skin dark like bronze, eyes deep and fearless. She stepped down from the carriage without a word. She expected mockery, contempt. But he simply bowed his head and said, "Welcome," and in that simple gesture, Valentina felt the start of a story the world wasn't ready to hear. The wagon left before the dust even settled. No goodbye, no waving hand, no look of pity. Valentina stood there, feet sinking slightly into the dry dirt path. Her beige linen dress, simply embroidered, swayed in the wind that carried the smell of old wood and burnt leaves. The sky above was heavy, loaded with clouds that seemed to hold tears the world refused to shed. In front of her, a little house of dark stones and clay roof, small, lonely, with narrow windows and a weathered wooden door. A simple clothesline with white sheets moved against the wall. And on the other side, a row of dried herbs hung upside down, giving off an earthy, soft, unexpectedly gentle scent. She didn't know what to expect, but she did expect this. The house was humble, yes, but there was order, care, as if every stone had been placed with purpose, as if the space said, "There's no luxury here, but there is dignity." Then he appeared. Thomas came out of the house carrying a small basket of firewood on his arms. He wore a worn cotton shirt, pants tied at the waist with a simple rope, and bare feet, his dark skin firm like the trunk of an ancient tree, his gaze deep, unsettlingly calm. When he saw her, he stopped. He looked her up and down, not with judgment, with quiet curiosity, with caution, like someone gauging the wind before taking the first step. And then he said, "The house is yours if you want to come in." Just that, no irony, no contempt. Valentina hesitated, heart racing, breath caught in her chest like a caged bird. But she walked. Every step was a challenge, every movement a reminder that she wasn't there by choice. Inside, she smelled firewood, tea from dried leaves, and something roasted, maybe corn, maybe roots. The house was divided into two rooms. In the main room, a wooden table with two chairs, a bench covered with striped fabric, shelves with clay pots, a rolled mat in one corner. In the other room, a small bed with dark blankets and a closed trunk. "You can sleep there," he said, pointing to the smaller room. Valentina just nodded. She still hadn't found her voice. Thomas went back to the kitchen. He lit the fire with steady, silent movements, brewed an infusion with green leaves. The sound of boiling water was the only noise. "Hungry?" he asked. Valentina opened her mouth, then closed it, finally answered, "I don't know." Thomas set a plate with a piece of bread and cooked roots on the table, then stepped back without sitting. She approached, sat, ate slowly. The food was simple but well-made. That threw her off too. She expected neglect, indifference, maybe even humiliation, but found space. That night she lay in bed with eyes open, heard the wind hitting the outer wall, heard Thomas's light footsteps in the other room, nothing more. No attempt, no extra word. She clutched the blanket to her chest, remembered. Her father's words, bargaining chip, and now here she was in a stone house next. To a man who owned her but didn't consume her, who noticed her but didn't judge. Her in the middle of the night, she woke to the sound of rain, drops drummed. On the clay roof, Valentina got up slowly, walked to the window. Outside, the glow of the lit lantern illuminated Thomas's face as he sat on the porch, watching. The darkness like he was talking to it. She stood there motionless, watching him from afar, and in that moment something whispered inside her. It wasn't fear. Wasn't anger, it was something else. A new restlessness, as if for the first time. Someone was treating her as an equal, not a burden, not a shame, not punishment. But as a presence, she went back to bed, closed her eyes tight and thought. If he doesn't hate me, why does it hurt so much? Thomas's silence was a mirror. And in it there were so many cracks, but there, in the slave's simple house, the first seed of a new story was born, a story where maybe, just maybe, she wasn't just what they said she was. The silence of the early morning was thick, almost solid, a dark veil covering the world. Crickets sang in the distance, interrupted now and then by the crackle of wood in the stove, which still held a thread of ember. The little house slept, but inside Valentina was awake. Lying on the rough mattress, body still, heart in turmoil, the sheet stuck to her damp skin, thoughts spun, pride pulsed. She had to get out of there. She couldn't stand the contrast between what she felt and what she saw. How could this man, a slave, treat her with more dignity than her own family? How could his silence say so much and still be unbearable? It was as if he saw what she tried to hide from herself. That night she got up quietly, the cold floor met her bare feet like ice. She grabbed the shawl hanging behind the door, slowly opened the side door at the back of the house. Outside, the wind was biting. Darkness embraced everything with ancestral force. Trees whispered restlessly. The dirt ground, still wet from rain, squelched under her steps, but she did look back. She walked first slowly, then faster. Her hands shook, the shawl slipped from her shoulder, the cold seeped through the gaps in her clothes. But she kept going like someone running, not just from a place, but from herself. The muddy trail led to an old hunter's path, a corridor of twisted trees where the moon barely penetrated, the sound of owls, the rustle of small animals. Everything created a symphony of tension, but she didn't stop. Valentina ran. Ran from a kindness she didn't understand, ran from her own reflection in the house's mirror, ran from the memory of the nobles, laughter and the calm in Thomas's eyes. Then the world went dark, a loose branch under her foot, a slip, a dry snap, and the fall. Her body rolled down the wet slope, mud stuck to her dress, the impact against the ground stole her breath. Her head hit a rock with a dull thud. The world spun. The sky seemed to turn upside down, and then nothing. When her eyes opened again, the world was blurry, smelling of wet earth, dried blood and firewood. Her forehead throbbed, her arms hurt, but there was warmth. On her skin, someone was carrying her. Thomas. He held her firmly, face serious. Breath ragged, he was covered in sweat, mud, and relief. They reached the house. He laid her down carefully on the bed, passed a damp cloth over her forehead. The water was warm, the gesture gentle. Valentina's soul shook more than her body. Why? She murmured, voice weak like a leaf in the wind. Thomas looked at her, eyes deep, tired but full. Because you were given to me, he answered softly, and I don't reject what life brings with respect. She turned her face, tears falling silently. He left, came back minutes later with a fresh cloth, a bowl of mashed roots and warm honey, fed her in silence, carefully, like caring for something precious. In the days that followed, Valentina was weak. Fever came, chills, but Thomas was always there. Changed the compresses, made soups, whispered words she didn't understand in an ancient, ancestral tongue, and every gesture. Tore down another wall, village children left flowers at the window, an elder brought a new blanket, an anonymous woman a jar of pumpkin jam, Valentina even. While resting, began to notice. The world outside was harsh, yes, but also made of people who cared. One morning, upon waking, she found on the table, beside the bed, a wooden carving. It was a woman with closed eyes and hands over her chest, and beneath her, carved in rough handwriting, big body, immense soul. She cried because no one had ever spoken to her like that, cried because what healed her wasn't the soup or the rest, it was the care, and maybe it was the start of love. Time in the wooden house passed slowly, as if the clock had surrendered to the rhythm of the wind, the smell of burning firewood, and the song of birds that came to sing in the mornings. Valentina woke with the sun touching her skin. The soft warmth came through the narrow window, warming her cheeks before she even opened her eyes. There was something new in that waking. No shouts, no orders, no rush, just the aroma of roasted corn coffee coming from the kitchen and the sound of the fire being revived. Thomas was already up. Always was. He made no noise, didn't speak loudly, but his presence filled the house. He was like a sturdy tree, silent, alive. He cooked with attention, mended his own clothes, organized herbs into small bundles that he hung beside the windows. And when he crossed paths with Valentina in the hallway, he simply said, "Sleep." Well, she just nodded. She still didn't know how to answer so much calm. In the first week, Valentina limited herself to watching. Her world had always been velvets, cold ballrooms, and servants who lowered their eyes. Now she saw beauty in the packed dirt floor, in the whistle of the kettle, in the delicate way Thomas washed his hands before touching the beans. Simplicity wasn't ugly, it was clean. True, as days passed, Valentina started getting up earlier, folded her own sheets, swept the porch, tried to learn to tie the herb bundles without much success. At first, Thomas watched from afar, never corrected, just smiled sideways. "You have a knack with your hands," he said one day. She stopped, surprised. No one had ever praised her hands. They always said they were thick, too big, but there, in that simple phrase, was recognition. One afternoon, Valentina sat on the porch bench and spent hours watching the sky change color. It was a silent show. Blue turned to gold, then lilac, and finally a dark blanket sprinkled with stars. Village children played with wooden bows in the distance. One of them, a girl with short braids, came closer. "Are you the strong man's woman?" she asked innocently. Valentina laughed. "I'm nobody's woman, but he looks at you like you are." Valentina fell silent. That echoed inside her like an old bell. The next day something changed. Thomas was in the garden planting roots when Valentina approached with a basket. Inside were mended clothes. She had spent the afternoon sewing alone. For the first time in years. "I did this," she said, showing him. Thomas held the sewn shirt, examined the crooked but sturdy stitches. "You did it with your heart," he said. She lowered her eyes, moved. That night, Thomas roasted cassava over the coals. Valentina made lemon tea with cinnamon peel. They sat side by side, didn't touch, but breathed in the same rhythm. Silence was no longer uncomfortable, it was company. Later, Valentina found on her pillow a small dried flower tied with red thread, and beside it, a folded paper in rough handwriting. "Sometimes beauty doesn't need applause, just space to grow." Valentina pressed the note to her chest, felt hot tears escape. For the first time, she wasn't crying from pain. She cried because she was seen, not as the fat daughter of a count, not as a bargaining chip, but as a woman, a whole woman. From that day on, Valentina began planting beside Thomas, harvesting roots, washing clothes at the river, laughing with the children. She learned to make soap from ashes, to read the sky, to predict rain, to recognize the scent of herbs. and little by little she learned to recognize herself not as a shame, but as a woman who had a place in the world, even if the world had told her she didn't. The wooden house, so small on the outside, turned into a home inside her, and simplicity became her greatest wealth. It was late afternoon when the sky turned a deep gold, as if the sun, before saying goodbye, wanted to tell a secret. Valentina was taking clothes off the line, folding each piece carefully, the scent of herb soap mixed with the smell of damp earth and the warm breeze coming from the fields. Thomas was far away, helping an elder fix a fallen fence. She was alone, but didn't feel lonely. The house, for the first time, seemed to sing with her presence, while storing the fabrics in the small wooden trunk against the bedroom wall. She noticed something different, a gap. The back of the trunk wasn't flush with the wall. Curious. She pushed it with effort. The furniture creaked, revealing behind it a small, dark leather box, dusty, tied with a red cord. Valentina hesitated, her heart pounded as if it knew that object wasn't just forgotten, it was a fragment of something bigger, something she didn't yet understand. She sat on the woven mat, placed the box on her lap, and untied the cord with trembling hands. Inside was a portrait, an old watercolor in pastel tones, the face of a smiling young woman with dark hair and almond eyes. The pose was serene, the lips delicate. She wore a necklace with a red stone, the same one Valentina had seen years ago around a relative's neck. She turned the portrait over. On the back, soft handwriting, almost faded, "To my love, your hope." The world stopped. Hope of Villa Real. Valentina's cousin, daughter of her mother's sister, a woman who disappeared mysteriously years ago after a scandal silenced in the court corridors. Valentina pressed the portrait to her chest. The pieces started falling into place painfully. The way Thomas had looked at her at first, with surprise, with memory, the silent care, the almost sacred respect. He hadn't just seen her as a stranger. She carried traits of someone he loved, loved for real. That night, Valentina waited, sat by the fire, the portrait beside her. When Thomas returned, tired, shirt stained with dust, she didn't say anything at first, just held out the image. He stopped. His body stiffened, his eyes took long to blink. His hand hesitated before taking the paper. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Behind the trunk." "It wasn't hidden from me, it was hidden from the world." Thomas sat, the fire between them danced, casting shadows on their faces. "She loved me and I loved her," he finally said. "She chose me when no one dared. I was free back then. Worked as a messenger for the king, but her father, your uncle, found out." Valentina listened in silence. Every word was a blade and a caress at once. "He had me arrested. They sold me as a slave before sunrise. They said she was sent abroad. Died of fever, but I never knew the truth." Thomas's eyes now shone, but not with anger, with pain. "And now you, of the same blood, with the same eyes, the same strength. When you arrived, I thought it was some kind of punishment or irony of fate, but then I understood it was a new beginning." Valentina could barely breathe. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to think I saw you as a shadow of the past. You are you, but it's impossible not to love what reminds me of what was torn from me." The words were firm, no manipulation, no pleading, just truth. Valentina stood slowly, approached him, looked deep into his eyes. "So you care for me with the memory of someone you loved, and with the desire to love again, if you allow it." She didn't answer, just sat beside him, rested her head on his shoulder, and there, between memories, wounds, and a warmth starting to grow from within, she understood. Not all women are loved first for their beauty, some are loved for their story, and Valentina, for the first time, felt her story was just beginning. That night, the sky seemed starless, as if even the heavens had gone quiet to listen to what Valentina's heart still Couldn't say. She paced back and forth in the small main room, bare feet touching. The cold, rough floor. The portrait of Hope still lay on the table, lit only by the flickering candle. The flame wavered as if it felt the same doubt burning. Inside her, Valentina couldn't sleep or understand. Thomas loved her, she already knew that, but what hurt was knowing he had loved before, and that love shared her blood. It was impossible not to feel like a substitute, a repeat, an echo. She felt torn. Part of her wanted to run, disappear, scream. The other wanted to stay, feel, touch. Then he appeared in the doorway, still in his open work. Shirt, skin sweaty, eyes attentive. "May I come in?" he asked. She didn't answer, but didn't say no either. Thomas entered slowly, sat on the wooden bench across the room, didn't try to get closer, didn't raise his voice, just took a deep breath. The silence between them was dense, but not empty. It was the kind of silence that screams everything the mouth can't say. Valentina finally spoke. "Do you see me or what you lost?" Thomas lowered his gaze, then lifted his face with firmness. "I saw what I lost when you arrived, but then I started seeing what I could gain if I had the courage to feel again." She frowned. "And did you?" he answered without hesitation. "Not yet, because I can't feel what you don't let me offer." The words were calm, no pressure, but carved with truth. Valentina moved closer, sat on the floor near the fire. They stayed there in silence. The flame crackled, casting dancing shadows on the house walls. Then she asked softly, "Why never try to touch me? Not when I had fever, not when I slept near you on the porch." "Why?" Thomas leaned forward, his strong hands clasped over his knees. "Because love, Miss Valentina, isn't hunger, it's time. Space, listening." She looked at him as if hearing a forgotten language. "But I'm yours. I was given to you as property." Thomas closed his eyes as if feeling a weight on his chest. "You're not property, you're a person, and I don't touch what doesn't give itself." Valentina felt her throat tighten, because in that moment she understood. Thomas was free inside, even enslaved, even marked. He loved by choice, with boundaries, with dignity. She, who had always been seen as an object, as punishment, as excess, was now seen as a whole, complete, respected woman. Her eyes filled. "And if I give myself," she whispered. Thomas moved closer, but stopped inches away. "Only if it's by choice, not out of pity, not gratitude. Not the past, but the now." She reached out a trembling hand and touched his face, the warm skin, the rough beard, the smell of earth, wood, and a man who lived with honor. "I'm afraid," she said, voice breaking. He smiled faintly. "Me too." And then they pressed their foreheads together. No kiss, no rush, just skin to skin, breath to breath. And in that instant all doubt turned to seed. They weren't lovers or a promise yet, but they were possibility. And for Valentina, who had spent her life being denied even by herself, that was the greatest form of love she had ever known. Dawn broke with a different silence, not the silence of emptiness, but of hope, a pregnant silence about to be filled with something sacred. Valentina woke with her heart racing. The breeze coming through the window carried the scent of field flowers and the distant sound of bells from the little village chapel. It was the day to uncover the truth about hope. The revelation had come through an old servant who sought her out timidly 2 days after the emotional encounter with Thomas. With eyes full of guilt, she confessed, "The girl didn't die. She was sent to a convent, a secret refuge for the court's illegitimate daughters. It's beyond the mountains, near the old mill." Valentina squeezed the woman's hand without anger. There was only urgency and promise. Now mounted on a small horse beside Thomas, she followed narrow trails, crossing streams and sleeping woods. The path was winding, but her purpose was clear. The convent was modest, low stone walls, a small garden, and a simple wooden chapel weathered by time. Girls ran in the dirt courtyard, dressed in plain, colorless clothes. but with eyes full of life. A woman in a white veil, Sister Josephine, received them with a direct gaze. Soledad always knew there was something different about her. She knew she wasn't born here, that she didn't belong to the silence, she said, leading them down a corridor smelling of fresh-baked bread and dried flowers. Valentina stopped in front of a wooden door. Her heart beat so hard it seemed to echo off the walls. The door opened slowly. There, sitting on a woven mat, a girl with long, loose brown hair read an old book. Her eyes were hope, but the nose, the chin, everything in her face screamed something Valentina already recognized in the mirror. It was blood, it was root. Soledad, she called, voice trembling. The girl looked up. Yes, Valentina knelt, eyes full of tears. You don't know me yet, but I've known you since before you were born. Thomas entered. Soon after, his gaze transformed when he saw the girl, a mix of shock, tenderness, and reverence, like finding a lost piece of his soul. The sister watched in silence. Are you my mother? Soledad asked softly. Valentina smiled, hands pressed to her chest. No, Flower, I'm your cousin, but maybe I can be your mother too. If you want. Soledad looked at Thomas. He turned to Valentina. She turned to him. Thomas stepped forward, knelt, eyes shining, took one of the girl's small hands. I'm the man who loved your mother with all my soul and was kept from knowing you. Soledad looked at both of them. After a few seconds of silence, she gave a shy smile, almost like a flower opening. So can I have a family now? Valentina cried without trying to hide it. You never stopped having one. Back home, Soledad rode a small horse, guided by Valentina. Thomas walked beside them. The sun wrapped them in golden light, and the path seemed less rough. In the wooden house, Soledad explored everything with curious eyes, touched the bench, the dried flowers, Thomas's books, Valentina's fabrics. Is this home? She asked. Yes, but now more than ever, Valentina answered, stroking her hair. That night, the three dined together, cooked roots, cornbread, and sweet tea. Soledad laughed at simple things, told stories she had read in the convent books. Thomas smiled silently, eyes fixed on her, as if trying to memorize every gesture. Before bed, Valentina told the girl the story of her mother, hope, without bitterness, only with love. Soledad fell asleep with her head in Valentina's lap, and Thomas, sitting beside them, ran his hand through both their hair with the gentleness of a man who knew everything now made sense. That night, Valentina looked at the sky through the window and thought, love isn't just reunion, it's reconstruction. And for the first time she felt complete. But 3 days later, while Soledad played with straw dolls Thomas had made, a black carriage appeared on the horizon. The sound of wheels on dry dirt echoed like war drums. Valentina recognized the golden crest on the side immediately, the Mendoza family. Her stomach knotted. Thomas came running from the garden, hands dirty with soil, face tense. Soledad stopped playing, sensing the change in the air. 3 men stepped down from the carriage. Count Richard, Valentina's father, dressed in black as always. Beside him, Mr. Gaspar, his older brother, Hope's father, and a third man Valentina didn't recognize. Tall, thin, fine clothes, calculating eyes. Valentina, Count said, voice cold. We've learned of certain irregularities. She positioned herself between the men and Soledad, who ran to hide behind her. What irregularities? She asked, voice steady. Gaspar stepped forward. The bastard child you took her from the convent without permission, that's theft. Theft is what you did to her. Valentina shot back. Separated a daughter from her father, lied about her death. The third man spoke for the first time. I'm Mr. Roger, royal advisor. I've come to resolve this civilly. Thomas approached slowly. His eyes were alert, but his hands stayed visible, no threat. The girl stays, he said, voice low but firm. Count Richard laughed with contempt. A slave giving orders, you forgot your place. My place, Thomas said, taking another step. It's beside those I choose to protect. The tension in the air was thick. Soledad clung to Valentina's skirt, trembling. Mr. Roger opened a scroll. We have a royal order here. The child returns to the convent. You, slave, will be transferred to the silver mines in the north, and you, Valentina, return home. No, Valentina said, voice cutting the air like a blade. I won't go back, and they won't. Count Richard advanced. In fury, you have no choice, you're my daughter. I was your daughter, Valentina corrected. Now I'm a woman of my own choice. Then Soledad stepped out from behind. Valentina, the girl, small but brave, looked straight at Mr. Gaspar. Are you my grandfather? She asked, voice clear. Mr. Gaspar hesitated. For a moment his hardened face showed a crack. Yes, he admitted. My mother talked about you before she died, Soledad said with a firmness that surprised everyone. She said you were afraid of love. Silence fell like a hammer. She didn't die of fever, the girl continued. She died of sadness because you took the man she loved from her. Mr. Gaspar paled. His hands shook. Thomas knelt beside Soledad. Tell them, little one. Tell them what your mother said. Soledad took a deep breath. Mommy told me true love is stronger than titles, that a man who loves for real is worth more than 1,000 nobles who only know how to hate. Child's words fell like stones in a still pond. Mr. Roger tried to regain control. These are a child's fantasies. We have orders to carry out. But something had changed. Mr. Gaspar looked at Soledad as if seeing hope for the first time. Count Richard seemed smaller, less imposing. Then Valentina made the decision that would change everything. If you want to take someone, she said, stepping into the center of the group, take me, but leave Thomas and Soledad in peace. No. Thomas said, standing, if anyone goes, we all go. And where would you go? Count Richard mocked. A runaway slave and 2 women, you wouldn't last a week. Valentina looked at Thomas, then at Soledad. In their eyes was a determination that had never existed before. Then let it be a week of freedom, she said. Better than a lifetime in prison. Mr. Roger frowned. You're talking escape. That's a crime against the crown. Crime, Thomas said, stepping forward, was separating a family. Crime was selling a free man as a slave. Crime was lying about a mother's death. The confrontation was reaching its peak. The escort men started moving, hands going to swords. Then Soledad did something unexpected. The girl walked up to Mr. Gaspar and held out a small dried flower. This was Mommy's, she said. She kept it in her prayer book, said when you were ready to love again, I should give it to you. Mr. Gaspar looked at the flower. His hands trembled as he took it, and for the first time in years, a tear ran down his hardened face. Hope, he whispered. She forgave you, Soledad said. Now, can you let me be happy? The silence that followed was eternal. The wind whispered through the trees, and the sun began to set, painting the sky gold. Mr. Gaspar looked at Thomas, then Valentina, finally Soledad. Mr. Roger, he said, voice breaking, I believe there's been a mistake in our papers. The royal advisor frowned. What do you mean? The child, Mr. Gaspar said, tearing the scroll in half, stays where she's happy. Count Richard exploded. You've lost your mind. I can and I do, Mr. Gaspar replied with renewed strength. I'm her grandfather. And I already failed once. Mr. Roger tried to protest, but Mr. Gaspar cut him off. Unless you want to explain to the king why we tore apart a family when the family itself forgives. Valentina could hardly believe it. Thomas held her hand. Soledad smiled as if she knew this moment would come. Count Richard climbed back into the carriage in rage. You'll pay for this betrayal, brother. I already paid, Mr. Gaspar answered, for far too many years. Before leaving, Mr. Gaspar approached Soledad one last time. May I visit sometimes? He asked humbly. If You come with love, the girl answered. You'll always be welcome. And so as the carriage rolled away, carrying the past with it, a new family formed in the present, not by blood or law, but by choice, the choice to love despite everything. That night, the three sat under the stars. Soledad fell asleep between Valentina and Thomas, and they knew they had won the most important battle of their lives, the battle for the right to love. 3 weeks had passed since Mr. Gaspar's departure, and life in the wooden house had found a new rhythm. Soledad learned to plant beside Thomas, while Valentina taught her to sew and read in the hottest hours of the day. It was a simple life, but complete, but the peace wouldn't last long. One morning, while Valentina prepared bread dough, she heard the sound of horses approaching, many horses. She looked out the variant's window and her blood froze. A royal entourage approached, banners fluttering in the wind, armor gleaming under the sun. In front, on a black horse, rode Count Richard, but this time he wasn't alone. Beside him rode Mr. Ferdinand of Castile, the king's cousin, known for his cruelty and thirst for power, and behind them an escort of 20 armed soldiers. Thomas called Valentina urgently. He came running from the garden, Soledad clutching his hand. Seeing the entourage, his face hardened. "Take Soledad inside," he said, voice low, "and stay with her." "No," Valentina answered firmly, "we face this together." The entourage stopped in front of the house. Count Richard dismounted with arrogance, followed by Mr. Ferdinand, a tall, thin man with a pointed black beard and eyes cold as ice. "Valentina," the count said, voice slicing the air, "your little rebellion is over." Mr. Ferdinand of Castile stepped forward, sent straight from the king. "You are all under arrest for contempt of royal authority, kidnapping a minor, and inciting rebellion." Valentina felt Soledad tremble beside her, but kept her voice steady. "What rebellion? We're just living in peace." "Peace?" Mr. Ferdinand laughed with disdain. "A runaway slave, a dishonored noble, and a bastard stolen from the convent. This is crime, not peace." Thomas stepped forward. "I didn't run. I was given as reward and fulfilled my part." "Your part, Count," Richard said, "was to serve in silence, not form a pretend family." The words fell like lashes. Soledad stepped out from behind Valentina, eyes blazing with anger. "It's not pretend," the girl shouted. "They love me for real." Mr. Ferdinand looked at her with contempt. "Quiet, child, you return to the convent today." "No," Thomas said, voice booming like thunder. "She stays." The air grew tense. Soldiers put hands to swords. Mr. Ferdinand smiled cruelly. "A slave daring to challenge me? This will be interesting." Then Valentina made the bravest decision of her life. She walked to the center of the group and looked Mr. Ferdinand straight in the eyes. "If you want someone to punish," she said, voice clear and strong, "punish me. I'm the one who chose to stay. I'm the one who brought Soledad here. I'm the one who chose this life." Count Richard exploded. "You have no right to choose anything. You're my daughter." "I was your daughter," Valentina corrected, "until the day you sold me like cattle." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the soldiers seemed uneasy. Mr. Ferdinand broke it. "Very well, if you want to take responsibility, you'll take the consequences too. You'll be tried for treason to family and crown." "And what would my sentence be?" Valentina asked, without showing fear. "Death," Mr. Ferdinand said coldly, "public hanging as an example to other women who think to defy order." Soledad screamed and ran to hug Valentina. Thomas clenched his fists, but knew one wrong move would end in tragedy for all. "But," Mr. Ferdinand continued with a cruel smile, "the king is merciful. There's an alternative." Valentina waited. "You return home, who your father chooses, and forget this fantasy. The slave goes to the mines, where he'll die in a few years, and the child returns to the convent, where she'll stay until old age." That's your mercy, Valentina asked with irony, more than you deserve, Mr. Ferdinand replied. Then something unexpected happened. From among the soldiers, an older man stepped forward. He was the captain of the guard. A veteran of many battles, scarred face, eyes that had seen much suffering. My lord, he said respectfully but firmly. May I speak? Mr. Ferdinand frowned. What is it, Captain Michael? I knew this child's father, the captain said. Looking at Soledad, I fought beside Thomas in 3 battles. He saved my life. Twice the air grew even tenser, and, Mr. Ferdinand asked impatiently, a man who saved lives doesn't deserve to see his family destroyed, the captain said. Not backing down, especially when he committed no crime. Mr. Ferdinand turned red with rage. Are you questioning my authority, Captain? I'm questioning whether this is truly the king's will, the captain answered, or just yours. The confrontation between the 2 men created a crack in Mr. Ferdinand's authority. Some soldiers began murmuring among themselves. Valentina saw her moment. She stepped forward and spoke loud enough for all to hear. Captain Michael is right. Thomas served the kingdom with honor, saved noble lives in battle, and his reward was to be separated from the woman he loved, have his daughter stolen, and live as a slave. She turned to the soldiers. You who fight for your families, do you think it's fair for a man to be punished for defending his? The murmurs grew louder. Some soldiers lowered their weapons. Mr. Ferdinand saw he was losing control. Silence. He shouted, I represent the king. Then prove it, a strong voice said from the road. Everyone turned. A lone rider approached wearing royal colors. When he got closer, Mr. Ferdinand paled. It was Mr. Alfred, the king's younger brother, known for his justice and wisdom. My cousin Ferdinand, Mr. Alfred said, dismounting. How convenient to find you here, Mr. Ferdinand stammered. I was carrying out royal orders. Orders I know nothing about, Mr. Alfred said coldly, because I wrote the original reward for this man. He pointed at Thomas. You saved the Marquis of Savannah's life, didn't you? Thomas nodded. Yes, my lord. And your reward was a companion, not a slave, Mr. Alfred continued. A companion free to choose to stay or leave. Mr. Ferdinand tried to protest, but she's a noble. She can't. She can choose her own life, Mr. Alfred interrupted, especially after being treated like property by her own family. He turned to Valentina. Ma'am, were you given against your will? Yes, my lord, Valentina answered. And now you choose to stay of your own free will? Yes, Mr. Alfred nodded. Then there's no crime here, just a family forming through love, not force. Count Richard couldn't hold back. She's my daughter, I have rights over her. You had, Mr. Alfred corrected, until you gave her away as an object. In that moment, you lost all rights as a father. He turned to Mr. Ferdinand. And you, cousin, exceeded your authority. The king will hear of this attempt at abuse of power. Mr. Ferdinand backed down, knowing his position was in danger. Mr. Alfred looked at Soledad, who watched wide-eyed. And you, little one, he said gently, where do you want to stay? With my family, Soledad answered without hesitation, clutching Valentina's and Thomas's hands. Then so be it, Mr. Alfred declared. By royal authority, I declare this family free and protected by the crown. The victory was complete. Mr. Ferdinand and Count Richard left in defeat, taking only their rage and humiliation. Mr. Alfred stayed for one last word. Live well, he said. But live quietly. There are still many who don't understand that true love knows no class or color. That night, the 3 hugged under the stars. They had faced the greatest storm of their lives and come out stronger. Now we are truly free. Valentina said, now we are truly family. Thomas said, now we can start our own story. Soledad said, and under the starry sky a new life began, a life built not on titles or wealth, but on the one thing that really matters, true love. The wooden door had been painted light blue. In the yard, flowers bloomed around pots. Made from cut gourds, the scent of herb soap, brewed in big iron kettles, filled the air. Children ran laughing among the corn rows. Women sang old songs while sewing in the sun. Thomas's old house was now called the Valley Refuge by everyone. And the one keeping it alive was Valentina. She walked in a raw linen dress, hair tied with a cloth embroidered by Soledad, bare feet marking the earth like roots. Taking hold, her eyes no longer sought approval, now they sought purpose. After the victory over Mr. Ferdinand and the royal protection won, Valentina decided to turn the house into something bigger than a home. She turned it into a welcome for new beginnings. Young women expelled from court for getting pregnant without permission, often girls from border wars, forgotten daughters, widows with no destination. To them, Valentina offered shelter, teaching respect. Each had a role. Some gathered herbs, others learned to sew, spin, read, and write. The garden grew every week. The clay oven, built by Thomas with help from the more experienced, gave off the smell of fresh bread every morning. Valentina taught with sweetness and firmness, with the calm voice of someone who learned love needs deep roots to bloom. She sewed more than fabrics, she sewed broken stories. One afternoon, a thin young woman named Esperanza, with eyes carrying more pain than years, approached shyly. "Miss Valentina, can I be somebody here too?" Valentina took her hands gently. Her hands were firm, wide, and now carried authority without violence. "You already are somebody, you just need to remember it." Esperanza cried because no one had ever said that to her. Thomas watched everything closely. Not as a leader or savior, but as foundation. He did what no one saw, fixed roofs, planted trees, made wooden toys for Soledad and the little children. And every night he sat with Valentina on the porch in silence, a silence that now meant fullness. Soledad grew like the land around her, fertile, colorful, strong. She studied with books Valentina brought from the convent, sang while washing cloths, learned words in 3 languages, called Thomas hut grandpa and Valentina mom. Neighbors who once turned up their noses now stopped on the road to greet. Some asked advice, others donated seeds, clay, bread, and everyone said, "Ma'am, you did hear what the nobles never did for us." Valentina smiled without vanity because now she knew her nobility wasn't in blood but in what sprouted from her hands. In the center of the house, she had a wooden mural built. There hung hand-drawn portraits of every woman who passed through the refuge. Above them, carved by Thomas, was written, "Where there was no place, we made ground." At night, under the soft glow of lanterns, Valentina sat with Soledad to tell stories, not fairy tales, but real stories of pain, overcoming, courage. And the girl listened with bright eyes, asking, "Mom, why are bad people so afraid of good ones?" Valentina stroked her hair and answered, "Because the good ones show everything they need themselves." It was a Sunday morning when everything changed again. Valentina was teaching a group of young mothers to make herbal remedies when she heard shouts from the main road. She ran to the refuge entrance and saw a scene that made her heart race. An old wagon approached, pulled by 2 tired horses. On the driver's seat, an elderly man guided with difficulty, but that wasn't what caught attention. It was what came behind the wagon. 5 women walked on foot, some carrying Barbies, others supporting elders, all in torn clothes, faces dirty with dust, eyes full of fear and exhaustion. The wagon stopped in front of the refuge. The old man got down with difficulty and approached Valentina. "Ma'am," he said, voice hoarse, "they told me you take in women in need." "Yes," Valentina answered. "Always. These women," the man continued, pointing to the group, "escaped a forced marriage. The youngest is only 14, the groom 60. Valentina felt rage boil in her veins but kept her voice calm. They're safe now, one of the women clearly. The leader approached. She was middle-aged, gray-haired, determined eyes. I'm Carmen, she said. These are my daughters and granddaughters. We fled in the night, but they'll come looking. Who? Thomas asked, having come over at the sound of talk. Don Steven Vasquez, Carmen answered, voice loaded with hate. A landowner who collects young wives. He's already buried 4. Valentina and Thomas exchanged looks. They knew the man's reputation: cruel, powerful, protected by the court. He has soldiers, Carmen continued. He'll come for us. Soledad came running, drawn by the noise. When she saw the tired, dirty children, she immediately ran for water and bread. You stay, Valentina said firmly. No one will be handed over against their will, not while I'm here. That night, the refuge turned into a fortress. Thomas organized watch shifts. The more experienced women taught the newcomers where to hide in case of danger. Valentina handed out kitchen knives to those who knew how to use them. It won't work, Carmen said in despair. He has too much power. He'll destroy us all. Maybe, Valentina admitted, but if we fall fighting. And if we survive, other women will know it's possible to resist. 3 days later, as Carmen predicted, Don Steven arrived with an escort of 15 armed men. He was a fat man, grey beard, small cruel eyes. He wore expensive clothes and rode an ornamented white horse. Come out of the house, he shouted. I've come for what's mine. Valentina appeared at the door, flanked by Thomas and several refuge women. Nothing here is yours, she answered firmly. 5 women of the Herrera family were promised to me in marriage, Don Steven said. They're legally my wives. Forced marriage isn't marriage, Valentina shot back. It's slavery. Don Steven laughed cruelly. Pretty words from a woman living with a slave. You have 5 minutes to hand them over or we storm the house. Then something unexpected happened. From inside the house came not just the 5 Herrera women, but all the others living in the refuge. 23 women in total, including Soledad. All carried something: kitchen knives, sickles, axes, big rocks. Their eyes shone with determination. Carmen stepped forward. Mr. Vasquez, let's make a deal. What deal? He asked with contempt. Fight one of us. If you win, take whoever you want. If you lose, leave and never come back. Don Steven burst out laughing. Fight a woman? Ridiculous. Afraid, Carmen taunted. The taunt worked. Don Steven's male pride was hit hard. Fine, he said, getting off his horse. But when I win, I take all of you. Accepted, Carmen said, but Valentina stepped forward. No. If anyone fights, it's me. Valentina, no, Thomas whispered. I started this refuge, she said with determination. It's my responsibility to defend it. Don Steven looked at Valentina and laughed even louder. A fat woman against me? This will be easier than I thought. His words echoed like a slap, but Valentina did flinch. On the contrary, she smiled. Mr. Vasquez, she said calmly, you're about to learn that underestimating a determined woman is the biggest mistake a man can make. The duel was set, right there in the refuge yard, witnessed by all. Rules were simple. Whoever fell first lost. Thomas approached Valentina. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, she answered. Not just for them, but for every woman ever called inadequate. Soledad hugged her waist. Mom, will you win? Valentina smiled and stroked the girl's face. I'll fight like my life depends on it, because it does. The circle formed, men on one side, women on the other. In the center, under the golden sunset light, Valentina faced Don Steven, knowing this moment would define not just the refuge's fate, but the future of all women who dared dream of freedom. The sun was setting, painting the sky blood red, and on the red dirt of the yard, 2 worldviews were about to clash. The circle was formed. On one side, Don Steven's men with gleaming swords and leather armor. On the other, the refuge women with simple tools and determined hearts. In the center, under the golden sunset glow, Valentina and Don Steven stared each other down. He was bigger, heavier, stronger, but she had something he never did. The strength of someone fighting not just for herself, but for all who came before. And all who would come after. Last chance to quit, fatty, Don Steven mocked, removing his shirt to reveal muscles still firm despite his age. Valentina did answer, just took her stance, feet firm in the red dirt, eyes locked on her opponent. Thomas had taught her some basic defense moves over the years, but she knew her real weapon wasn't technique, it was determination. Begin, Carmen shouted. Don Steven charged like an angry bull, expecting to knock Valentina down with the first blow, but she dodged at the last second, using his own weight against him. He stumbled past and nearly fell. The women cheered. The soldiers murmured in surprise. Beginner's luck, Don Steven growled, turning for another attack. This time he came more calculated, trying to grab her arms. Valentina let him get close, then kneed his stomach. He groaned in pain and backed off. Impossible. One soldier muttered. Ma'am is winning, Soledad shouted, but Don Steven was far from beaten. In rage, he scooped a handful of dirt and threw it in Valentina's eyes. Blinded temporarily, she didn't see the punch coming. The impact sent her to the ground. Now it's over, Don Steven crowed, advancing to finish, but Valentina rolled aside, cleared her eyes quickly and stood. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, but her gaze stayed steady. You fight like a coward, she said clearly, and you talk too much for someone losing. He shot back, attacking. Again, the fight went on for long minutes. Valentina took more hits, but gave them two when she could, using her smarts against his brute force, her agility against his bulk. The sun was almost down when Steven managed to grab her from behind, arm around her neck. It's over, he panted. Surrender. Valentina felt the air leaving, vision darkening, but then she heard Soledad's voice shouting, Mom, remember who you are. And she remembered the fat girl humiliated in the palace, remembered the woman given as punishment, remembered every night of pain and every morning of hope, remembered every woman in the refuge who found strength to start over. With the last breath she had, Valentina stomped hard on Don Steven's foot, and when he loosened his grip for an instant, head butted backward, hitting his nose. He let go, screaming in pain and blood. Valentina turned and with all the strength she could muster, shoved him. Don Steven, already off balance from pain and exhaustion, stumbled and fell hard to the ground. He lay there panting and defeated. Silence fell for a moment, then the women erupted in victory shouts. Soledad ran to hug Valentina, followed by all the others. Don Steven got up slowly, face red with humiliation. This can't be happening. It happened, Valentina said, still breathing hard but victorious. Now keep your word and leave. My men, he started, looking at his soldiers, but the soldiers didn't move. Some even lowered their weapons. They had just seen a woman beat a man in fair combat, and it changed something in their views. One soldier, young man no older than 20, stepped forward. Sir, a bet's a bet, we have to go. Don Steven looked around for support, but found only disapproval or indifference. His defeat had shattered the myth of his invincibility. This isn't over, he muttered, climbing onto his horse. For us it is, Valentina answered. You have no more power over these women. And so, humiliated and beaten, Don Steven left with his men, leaving behind not just the women he came for, but a piece of his reputation. That night, the refuge celebrated like never before. Bonfires were lit, food shared, stories told. Valentina, face still bruised from the fight, became a living legend. Miss Valentina, Carmen said with tears in her eyes. You saved our lives. We saved each other, Valentina corrected. That's the power of women united. The years that followed were of growth and prosperity. For the Valley Refuge, Valentina's fight story spread across the kingdom, drawing women from faraway places. Some came seeking protection, others simply wanting to learn to live with dignity. Valentina aged gracefully, hair filling with silver, threads that shone in the sun like stardust. Her hands, marked by work lines, were still steady, but now knew when to rest. Her skin carried gentle marks of life, and her eyes, oh, her eyes stayed intense as ever, only now without weight, without pain. It was an autumn afternoon when the sky turned pink and gold, clouds scattered like dancing veils in the wind. The years had turned the refuge into a thriving small village. Wooden houses multiplied, the garden became a farm, and what started as shelter for a few became home for hundreds. Valentina sat in her woven reed chair. Beside her, Soledad, now a young woman, read aloud to a group of girls sitting on mats on the floor. The book was old, thick cover, worn pages, but the words inside stayed alive. She was given as punishment, handed over as penalty, but loved like a queen, Soledad read, voice firm and sweet. And in the dirt where everyone saw filth, she made flowers grow. The girls, eyes attentive, sighed. Some rested heads on friends' shoulders, others closed eyes as if wanting to keep the story inside their chests. Soledad closed the book, carefully smiled at her audience. And do you know what her name was? The girls answered in chorus, Miss Valentina. Valentina laughed softly. The sound of her laugh was old fabric stitched with threads of new joy. She lowered her eyes for a moment in humility, as if still surprised by her own path. Thomas appeared in the doorway, older but still imposing, broad shoulders, dark lively eyes like in his youth. He carried a bowl of freshly picked fruit. Soledad ran to him, hugged his waist, and together they went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. Valentina stayed alone for a moment, watching the sunset. There on that porch, she remembered everything: the ballroom where she was humiliated, the wagon that left her at the wooden house, Thomas's silence, the fall, the healing, the truth, the lost girl, the woman she chose to become. And then she smiled. It wasn't a triumphant smile, it was a smile of peace, quiet conquest. Valentina hadn't beaten the world. She had beaten herself, and that was more than enough. That same night, under a sky sprinkled with stars and silence, Soledad approached her with a candle in hand. They asked me to choose a name for the new garden. Can I call it Valentina Garden? She answered, eyes full of tears. Only if you promise to plant love every day. Soledad nodded. Then, in a gesture that was now part of both their souls, she took the hands of the woman who raised her and whispered, You chose me, and because of that, I'm free. Valentina hugged her tight, deep, like someone who knows the strongest seeds grow in mud after rain. Before sleeping, Valentina walked to the memory mural, touched the portraits one by one, and in the center placed a new frame. In it was Hope's image. Now you're home too, she said softly. She returned to the porch, looked at the sky. The moon shone full, and there, alone with the wind and the story, she said the phrase that closed her own book. I was given as punishment, but I chose to stay, and in that I won. The years kept passing like pages of a beloved book. Valentina became grandmother to dozens of children raised in the refuge, teacher to hundreds of women who learned to live with dignity, and legend to thousands who heard her story. When she finally passed at 72, on a quiet spring morning, the whole valley mourned. Her funeral was a celebration of life, with flowers picked by women's hands and songs sung by voices she helped find. Soledad, now grown and leader of the refuge, spoke. For all, she taught us true love knows no sizes, colors, or classes, that real nobility is in actions, not blood, and that a determined woman can move mountains. The Valley Refuge kept thriving for generations. Valentina's story was told and retold, inspiring women across the kingdom to fight for their rights, choose their own lives, create their own destinies, and so the woman given as punishment became a symbol of freedom. The fat girl humiliated in ballrooms became a heroine sung in villages. What began as a life of rejection ended as a legacy of love. In the garden that bears her name, a wooden plaque carved by Thomas still stands. Here lived Valentina Mendoza. Given as punishment, she chose love. She taught us true beauty is in courage, and that a big heart always finds its place in the world. And every morning, when the sun rises over the valley, the flowers planted by women's hands open to the light, reminding everyone that, as Valentina taught, where there was no place, it's always possible to make ground. And so ends the story of Valentina Mendoza and Thomas, two rejected souls who met after a devastating storm and built the strongest love of colonial times, proving true nobility is in blood or titles, but in the courage to defend those we love. If you made it this far, thank you so much for living this epic journey with us. Drop in the comments what set your heart on fire most. Was it Valentina facing Don Steven in the final duel, the creation of the refuge for rejected women, or maybe the moment she chose to stay and build her own family? And don't forget to like this video if it burned your soul. Subscribe to Period Tales for more stories that change destinies, and hit the bell so you don't miss any of our narratives of love and courage. Share with that special person who needs to believe that sometimes we're given as punishment to discover our true strength, and that one simple act of kindness can change the whole world. See you in the next story, where once again we'll prove that when two brave hearts unite, they can move mountains. Hug to all your hearts, builders of bridges and defenders of true love.